So welcome everyone to Startup Shuk. We're joined today with Tzach Horowitz. Welcome, how are you?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your class was very interesting. By the way, you are the CISO of Ever After, CEO of Cybertech, and co-founder of CyberGuru, which recently raised around 25 million US dollars. So that's very significant.
Yeah, I think it was an amazing journey, and it still goes on. And one of the lessons is that you have to enjoy the journey, because it's like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low, but you have to push forward. And CyberGuru, we've been going there for about 7 years. So we've had our highs, we've had our lows, and currently we are in an amazing stage.
And that's what we like to discuss, really, which is the founder's journey. I think a lot of podcast talks about the technology, which we could dive into later in the end, but a lot of people miss the founder's journey, building the company from 0 to 1, especially with aspiring founders. They really lack the resources that a lot of experienced founders have, especially the ones in university. They're still studying as well. So I would like to hear from people like you who are literally have spent ages in the industry. You are 7 years in CyberGuru and 6 years in Cybertech, so you are the guru in the cyberspace. I'd love to hear your journey. Maybe we can bring you back to a time when you were before an entrepreneur. Where did you start your journey? What was your childhood like? And yeah, what led you to entrepreneurship?
Okay, I think I've had an amazing ride. I started when I was 11 to study programming. Back then, we only had Fortran, which doesn't exist today, so nobody knows what it is. But I found it so amazing that I studied whatever I could. And when I reached, I think, 15, I started teaching classes and making some money writing programs for other people. When I joined the army, as everybody does in Israel at age 18, I went to Mamram programming course, and there I had what I think every founder should know, the first shock. Because up till then, I was at the top 1% of everywhere I went. And suddenly you go and everybody is the top 1%. Mm-hmm. And that's nothing to be afraid of. It just means that instead of cruising without any effort, you have to work hard in order to remain where you are, which means this is what it is. And then I spent 6 years developing defense systems in the Israeli Air Force. And when I went out, I had quite a long career as a developer, then as a team leader, project manager, VP R&D, CTO in various multinational corporations and startups. And at some point of time, I made the logical transition to handling customers, meaning customer success, delivery manager, technical account manager, and then business development manager, and so on. And along the way, I found that I wanted to work for myself to be able to make changes and to advance technology, to advance customers. And then I built my first company, which is what is called a software house, a company focused on developing products for others. And during 2000, we had a huge collapse of everything in the software industry. So I went back to consulting and to a brief, employment as an employee and not as an entrepreneur. And as soon as the opportunity came back again, I returned to the startup space, first as a CTO of one startup, then as VP R&D, VP Technology, and started trying to build a couple of startups. Some of them didn't work, some of them we raised a little bit of money, and when the money was gone, so was the startup. And I found out that the best thing I could do was to bridge the gap between the technology and the business and work with customers and vendors to bring new things to life. So we started activities. I built an American operation for an European operation for an American cybersecurity company, and we sold and delivered cyber products for most of the top tier companies in Europe, which by the way extends over the limits of Europe, because Americans don't always know where the geographical ends of a continent happen. So that was amazing, which was an American cybersecurity startup, by the way. And after that, we started a few ventures. 2016, we had an idea with a few Italian friends to build a cyber academy, a school, because even then there was a lack of cybersecurity professionals. So we started doing that and started providing courses. I provided a couple of training myself, and we found out that it's not scalable. So as much as we wanted, the logistics of getting, especially when you're on a wide area, are difficult when you want to scale up and build a great company. So we took an opportunity, took some money out of pocket, and presented our idea to a design partner, a large customer, one of the largest banks in Italy. And on the PowerPoint presentation, they gave us our first customer receipt or customer payment, which allowed us to develop the first version of the product, which, by the way, was technologically not very advanced. But business-wise, the customer liked it. And so did other customers, and it started growing. And then we understood we had something that could make changes in how people train in cybersecurity, and went to raise money. And our first round of funding was very difficult because cybersecurity startups in Europe are few and very further apart, and European VCs are very conservative in how they think. But we found the ones that believed in us. We met dozens, and it doesn't matter how many you meet. It matters the ones that believe in you and provide you the funding. And we built it, and we started the company and went and grew it, and it's an amazing company now. And when we reached the stage when we needed to raise round B, and this is another interesting lesson, we had the start of the crisis a couple of years ago where investments were dwindling and nobody wanted to invest. So we took a bridge loan with the existing funds, which believe in us. Took our time to improve our cash flow, to improve our market positioning. And this year we went again and we met over 100 funds. And I'm not kidding you, over 100 funds until we found the ones that believed in us again and saw the value we bring and allowed us to close the deal and get the large funding.
What a breakdown. You just spilled the entire life of your journey.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to discuss in there. But maybe to pick some of the questions in the beginning of the breakdown you gave there. I remember Fortran. My dad wrote several codes in there, but I haven't actually touched it. What sort of programs did you write, and who are your customers?
So we started as young people writing for as part of a program from the Israeli government of promoting science. So we used to work remotely on Tel Aviv University computer. And then when I was 15, I started writing in another obsolete language called RPG. I know. It was a reporting language running on IBM mainframes. I did it for a large company off school when I was in high school. And
how'd you get the connections to build projects for them? Through the Mamram?
No, that was before Mamram. That was through personal contacts.
Wow.
So, it's not important how you get the contacts as long as you find them.
And how did they have the trust to be able to allow you to build programs for them?
Well, it started with small tasks, and then the more I did, the more they got confidence, and the more they wanted me to do.
Gotcha. And you said you spent a few time in employment, but also in entrepreneurship. How do you realize when it's actually time to jump into like full founder mode and build something yourself, like stop employment?
When I have the right idea, when I have the right funding, I always meant to be independent and be a founder and change things in the world. But you have to find the right ideas and to have the ability to do that. Whenever I had no choice but to go back, I would go back because it's easy to find a job and to make a living. But I always went back to entrepreneurship. And by the way, in 2019, when COVID started and I couldn't fly to Italy to continue working on the startup, I built my other company, CyberProtect, which is a cyber consultancy helping startups to secure themselves. So you don't have to just wait until something happens. As an entrepreneur, you have to always push forward or always look for the opportunities.
Did you start CyberProtect yourself?
Yeah.
And you're the only founder?
Yeah.
And how was it like being the only founder in a company? I heard so many advice from YC and all these accelerators that you have to have a team. And I have built a company before, and having a team really helps. But it also have a challenge, meaning you have to align your incentives, your goals. But building alone, you have more independence. But then again, you have less manpower. So how do you manage that?
You have to balance it, and you have to understand where you are in the life of a company. And it took me about 6-8 months to find the first person to join me, a very experienced cybersecurity professional, and then another one and another one. And it depends on how you build the company. This is not really a startup, but a services company, which means that even though I could raise funds and I have, when I started it, I put together an investor presentation and I had some angels looking into it and saying they would invest. I decided my way, and it's always a personal decision, that I wanted to build it as a profitable company from day one, which is not the startup road. In a startup, you would like to build and grow and not focus on profitability because that's what's expected of you. And when you build a services company, you're looking at it from a different angle. So as soon as I had enough customers to bring in another person, I brought another one, and then another one and another one.
And tell us a bit about, maybe for people who are not too familiar with the cybersecurity space, what sort of challenges and problems that people face in companies that CyberProtect aims to solve?
Well, as we're working mostly with startups, the KPIs, the key performance indicators of founders, are to build a team, to build a product, and to get a product market fit, and make a good GTM, go-to-market strategy. And cybersecurity doesn't fit in at the first stage. But as soon as you face the outside world, as soon as you face customers, investors, and especially as soon as you have something out there in the internet, you face the risks of somebody breaking in and destroying your database or your servers, or somebody leaking your information, or worse, your customers' information. And of course, suddenly your investors or your customers or regulators, if you have personal data or medical data or financial data, require you to comply with the standards. And then you need someone to help.
Do startups mostly face into trouble first and then they look for solutions like yourself, or do they encounter mostly regulations? We need this A, B, C, D certificate, so we need to have our compliance ready, and then they contact you?
In most cases, it seems that startups tend to ask the CTO to take care of security the same way as they ask the CTO to take care of IT. And then when it reaches a stage where the CTO finds that he's spending more time, or she is spending more time on security than on developing the product, they ask for help.
Gotcha. But how do you educate the startups that they need these compliances? Because a lot of startups really, they don't care, and maybe I'm guessing you're also targeting which level of maturity of the company.
So as soon as startups, and then we have to start differentiating between the types of startups. If you're typically nobody asks you for compliance, and then it could take a while before you're required to do anything, or you're aware of having to do anything. But if you're developing applications and you want to put them on the App Store, then suddenly there are requirements you have to comply with. And if you are a B2B company selling to other companies, especially in SaaS services, then customers will not work with you unless you are secure. Investors look at you and they ask you to be secure in order for them to know that their investment is safe. And actually, many of our customers are coming from venture capitals, from funds that sends their portfolio companies that don't have internal security organizations to work with us.
So even the VCs know which companies that they have in their portfolio that need these compliance issues.
Yeah. And then there are the ones that, unfortunately, they have been affected, that had a breach, had an attack, and suddenly they understand they need it.
Any stories you can share about people who have been attacked?
I cannot name names, of course.
Of course.
But one of the most common cases that we've seen in the past few years, is that cyber criminals are looking for investments and are trying to divert the investment funds. So if you have an investor that is going to transfer $1 million, $2 million, $10 million to a startup, and he might suddenly receive a request to funnel the funds instead of the company account to an account in Hong Kong or in Macau or even in the US in another bank. And if they are not aware of the risk, the money could go away. So we've seen it in several occasions. In one case, it was, as far as we could determine, a North Korean attack trying to divert money, and they took over an email account of one of the parties in the transaction, and the other party was sure he was communicating with the correct party and almost made the transfer. We were lucky they made a phone call to verify, and then we investigated, we found the perpetrator, and we blocked it.
How does these attacks usually happen? What the methods that they use? Because the one you said is literally them breaking into the email accounts and use it that way. Are there also methods, maybe they use phishing attacks, social engineering?
Yeah, so they use phishing attacks, they use social engineering, they use existing data banks of previous breaches. So if you're using the same password for multiple accounts, that's a very bad practice. And so every company that has been breached, the information flows to the darknet, and I can say a few words about darknet if it is. So the largest part of the internet is not the one that we see on a day-to-day basis. There is a huge part of it which is hidden, which you need specific browsers, specific access points, and specific authorizations in order to access. And there are huge amounts of information and services you can get or buy, starting from social security numbers for American citizens, via passport numbers, credit card numbers, bank account credentials, and username passwords for services from any breach that ever happened. And of course, up to drugs, violence, and any other illegal material.
So anyone right now can open Tor, access one of these marketplaces, buy an identity that has been stolen a few years back of maybe a company, a Google's employee, right? Use their account, join their email, see for opportunities, and basically make an attack.
Exactly. And one other vector of attack that we are seeing a lot in the past year is attacks on cloud services. We have seen the attack on Microsoft that resulted in, as far as we know, Chinese hackers getting access to the email accounts of the top 50 managers in Microsoft, which means that they get any information they want. We've seen attacks on Amazon Web Services, on Google, on other cloud providers, and as soon as they do that, you don't even know, and it's not even under our own protection. We have to be able to recover from that. Another major attack that happened a couple of years ago was on a platform, a security platform used to monitor other security platforms called SolarWinds. And that attack enabled an attacker to get a foothold into any company that has deployed that product in their premises, which means that you're buying a security product in order to secure you, and it might be breached. Any software that can be breached is vulnerable. And if you're not aware of the dangers and risks and the ramifications, the remediations you have to take into protecting yourself, even if you have done nothing wrong, you might be breached.
I'd love to discuss your founder's journey again, but I think I like where this is going regarding the topic of how much we understand our own softwares, especially in today's age where everybody's using AI to code, and we kind of understand less and less about what we are building. Even right now in big companies like Facebook, Google, each employee don't really understand what's going on. They're building a code, they're pushing it to the main repo, but then it's so huge and so cluttered that it's no one person can just understand the whole thing. And even more so with AI writing half of our code in the future or even now. So where do you see this is going? Because if we understand our code very little, how can we protect it?
It's very difficult. And that is why we have a lot of business. No, I'm kidding, but you have to understand, and each one of us as a founder has to understand the risks inherent in what we do. Using AI, there are ways to limit the risks of AI. Using third-party software, and everybody uses third-party libraries to develop, because it's not realistic to develop with reasonable costs anything without using them. You have to track what you're using, create an SBOM, a software bill of materials, understanding what you're using, and then find out if there are notifications of vulnerabilities or actual exploits of pieces of code you use. And then test, penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, do a threat analysis, threat modeling, and most important than everything else is be prepared for any incident, which comes into two classes of activities a founder needs to have in mind. One of them is business continuity and disaster recovery, meaning how do we recover from a catastrophic event? And the second is incident response. How do we manage and respond to a cybersecurity incident?
What would be cool, maybe we have a tool which monitors all our code while we are building it and have on the sidebar like a list of possible vulnerabilities. Do we have tools like that already does that?
Yeah, definitely. So there are multiple tools that perform multiple activities, and they are divided into several categories such as SCA, source code analysis, SAST, code analysis, and DAST, dynamic code analysis. And I can go into details, of course, but there's a huge knowledge base behind it. But unfortunately, no tool can give you a 100% guarantee. And so you have the GitHub scanning application that you have to use if you're using GitHub to scan for hard-coded credentials in your code. And if you're using GitLab or Bitbucket, you have the additional tools. But at the end of the day, nothing can protect you 100%. So we have to be aware of it. We have to minimize the risk as much as we can and be prepared to manage the risk if it realizes.
What is the lowest hanging fruit of problems that's most common that startups can easily fix while they're in the beginning of their journey?
First of all, backup.
As in the database, or as in
Database, code, whatever. And one of the factors in backup and business continuity planning is knowing that you don't leave your backups at the same place as where you have the original data.
right?
So if you have your data on Azure and your initial backup on Azure, you can perform a secondary backup on AWS or GCP or on an on-premises server, as long as you have another copy which should be immutable, meaning it cannot be changed in order to sabotage it, which allows you at the worst case to recover. Then you have to be able to recover from operational issues. So if something breaks in your AWS region, you can fail over to another region. And you have to start planning for it, which means high availability, redundancy, and so on.
And these backups are ready, meaning you can access the data anytime, or they're just there in case of a problem when they arise.
Backups should be tested periodically to make sure they are ready for recovery. But on a day-to-day basis, usually you don't need to restore them unless there's an issue.
But are they used to retrieve data on an operational level, or they're just there so that when a database A is hacked, you can transfer everything from B to A?
Yeah, they are there. It depends on the architecture. There are multiple ways to design the architecture, and they depend on what we call a BIA, business impact analysis, which goes into, and again, I'm starting to be a bit technical, two key factors, which are RTO and RPO, recovery time objective and recovery point objective, meaning how long do we wish to allow the data to, or the service to be down, which is the recovery time objective, and how much data are we willing to lose in case of a catastrophe. So the ability to use multiple servers functioning at the same time allows us to have a very short RTO. It has a cost associated with it, and the RPO depends on the type of business we do. If what we do are transactions that must be preserved in any case, then we have to have an online backup that backs up any transaction all the time, and make sure that our online database only commits a transaction when we know that the backup exists, which means that they have to be in sync.
Mentioning the word in sync, my mind immediately goes into, well, what's quite popular recently, which is blockchain. Do you have any comments on how that could be useful in data security and having backups spread across the blockchain?
So blockchain has the advantage of being immutable, meaning you write it and it stays there. And it has the disadvantage of performance.
I see.
So it depends on the specific use case. It could be very appropriate for some use cases while being not good enough for other use cases. And it is the same for any technology. I try to be agnostic to technology because any specific technology can be great for your startup or can be a hindrance if it blocks advancement.
Talking about cyber attacks, how common actually are cyber attacks? Because we often hear only the big ones, which cost millions of dollars in damages. But I'm guessing even for big companies like Google, Meta, they have daily scar tissues that they obtain from smaller attacks.
Yeah, so there are statistics, and the number and the magnitude and the complexity of attacks rise all the time, and especially with two processes that happen. One of them is the leakage of attack tools from both the American government, the NSA, and I could give you some pointers on ATO, attack tools leaked from the NSA by shadow brokers, which is an interesting story, and leaking from allegedly Russian military intelligence into cyber organizations and so on. So there's a proliferation of weapons which are proven and developed by cyber criminals or cyber intelligence operators. And the other thing is the rise of AI, which allows us to write code faster and better. It allows the cyber criminals to create malicious software or malware faster and better and to our detriment.
Talking about these inter-country attacks, I'm guessing, do the government have any involvement in supporting these criminals? Which attacks other countries they have political competitions with? Like the one in Russia, for example, they have actually funding from this? Well, we cannot only speculate, but are they a thing being funded by the government?
So there are paramilitary cyber organizations which are either very well connected with the cybercrime organizations or are the cybercrime organizations which are, according to American intelligence reports, are linked to Russian military intelligence. There are similar intelligence operations being performed by other governments globally, which is not something new. Even if you go back, and cybersecurity didn't invent espionage. Yes, espionage existed before that.
Yeah.
So the methods were simpler, the encryption. Now we talk encryption as part of cybersecurity, but 50 years ago, when you wanted a spy to send you information, they would encrypt it using a code book or using another method, and they would send you encrypted messages. So it's not something new. And governments would spy on other governments or other corporations in order to gain advantage, in order to move forward in the global food chain. And we can discuss Americans suspecting Japanese in stealing secrets in the metalworking industry or the car industry, and then Chinese attempting to steal, or Americans spying on other countries. So I'm not saying it is one-sided. I'm saying that at any point of time it can happen. It depends on the motivations on the government.
Right, and it's very hard to keep accountable because of the feature of anonymity in the internet. And back then, if we just attack another country kinetically with an army, you can tell, and you might have repercussions in the global scene. But now anyone can attack anyone, and there's no trace of it. Or maybe is there a trace? You can clarify on that as well. It's very hard to keep accountable. And that being said, if there's just one country with the strongest cyber power and skill to hack anyone, then they have basically perfect control because they have perfect information. They can just retrieve anything they want from any country and gain knowledge and leverage that way.
There was a discussion in the US, I think it was 12 years ago, regarding the question whether a cyber attack is considered the same as physical attack or a non-conventional attack, and whether non-conventional methods are appropriate in order to counter a critical destructive cyber attack, which is an interesting discussion which shows you the importance being applied to such an attack, because a cyber attack can cause damage which is much larger than a physical attack. And I will give you an example. Last year we had an attack on Colonial Pipeline, which is the largest pipe company moving oil inside the United States, and many American drivers could not fill their cars with gasoline because the company shut down its infrastructure after it was hacked. So the damage is huge. Another example is a NotPetya attack, which the Russians launched against Ukraine but spread around the world and halted the shipping industry for a long term. And the damages were in the billions.
Are there any trace you can obtain from these attacks?
Yes, it is difficult, and in many cases you can't prove it in court, but you have enough circumstantial evidence to have enough confidence to say who did it.
Yeah.
And there are, for any criminal organization, there are fingerprints or in the methods of how they perpetrate these attacks. So although you can mimic another company's attacking methods, it is mostly possible to have at least some idea. And especially if there's an attack, usually you'd have a guess who has the motivations to do it.
Right. What do these traces look like? You mentioned methods, but aren't there technically infinite ways to attack any particular company? So how do you exactly be confident in the trace that you collect?
There are research organizations. What they do, they track the cyber activities and they analyze them. It is very difficult to build a good cyber attack framework. And this could be another discussion for another day. But at the end of it, you end up with a list of tools you can use. And each of these tools have their own distinct capabilities and their own distinct signatures, which can be in some cases identified. And the more you use them, the more there is information on them. And today, research institutions in the West and cyber threat intelligence companies have common denominations for cyber attack groups, their conventions, who they attack, how they attack, what information they are looking for, which provide at least an initial guess on where to look for and how to look for the attack vectors and the signatures of attack.
Gotcha. So like the same way you can attack any person with any tools like sticks and stones, but you would probably, any burglar would probably use like a gun, and guns are identifiable and you can like trace them, and that's how they're identified.
Yeah. So even if you don't know the specific gun, you would know the model from the bullet.
And then you can guess and then makes further speculations.
And you can go, in this specific analogy, you can go and see who bought this specific type of a gun in the last 6 months. It could be a good start of a correlation.
So it seems to me that the cybersecurity space is something that's very, very obscure to most people because it requires a lot of technical and also experiential expertise in order to build something of value. How would you advise anyone to enter the cybersecurity space? You were lecturing, of course, in my class before I met you, and a lot of the students are clueless mostly about the cybersecurity space. We are very, very far from it. A lot of technology like AI, blockchain, it's very popular with the younger folks, and people are quite open and accessible to anyone to learn and build value in there. The cybersecurity space is not so much like that. I know a lot of people who are, they play HackerBox, they hack online competitions and learn that way. But for the rest of us who are not too technical, how would you advise starting to learn about the cybersecurity space?
First of all, nobody is born a cybersecurity specialist. Nobody is born a hacker. You might get an affinity for that, but everybody learns it. When you want to learn cybersecurity, there are schools, there are trainings, there are online training courses which are very good. And there are very good colleges in Israel that teach cybersecurity. And of course, there are the universities such as Reichman, which give the basic knowledge. And then starting to look into it, there are a lot of places to look in, and as an entrepreneur who wants to start a startup, look where you can disrupt the system, where there are things that are vulnerable. Today, AI is very vulnerable because there are at least 6 or 8 attack vectors people are talking about in organizations using an AI. So there are many startups in this space, but it is not solved yet. So anybody coming with a new and amazing idea on how to protect companies while using AI smartly could raise a lot of money and build a great company, a great startup, as an example. Blockchain, again, it used to be a great hype. Now it's not so much, but still, if you find a new and usable idea, it could be a great one, and so on. Find something, research the domain, research what other companies, what other startups are doing, and find your own way.
I want to do a mom test with an idea a friend of mine had, because in the next class after yours, we were asked to present our own cybersecurity ideas, and one of my friend had this idea to secure LLM API calls, because OpenAI is used by everyone, but even the sample code that they provided online seems very, very vulnerable to SQL injections.
Yes.
My friend had the idea of a company called screaming at the API, meaning like just rigorously testing it to see if someone can break into it while we're calling OpenAI or receiving API calls from OpenAI to secure it from people injecting stuff that we might not want in our code.
That's a great idea. I would take it further, because if you do it just for OpenAI, then OpenAI can do it.
Right.
But if you do it for any AI, any general LLM, then you use Claude, you use Gemini, then you can track it and find the way to do it while people develop before it gets into their code base.
Gotcha. Cool. So I'll make sure to tell Max about it, and he can continue building it. So that's all of that came out of CyberProtect. We talked about CyberProtect, and it leads to a lot of stuff. You were developing CyberProtect while CyberGuru is not running it. So what was CyberGuru about, and what was the journey like? You mentioned a bit about it in the beginning, but maybe you can elaborate.
So we started, as I said, we thought we would build a cybersecurity school, found out it didn't work. We pivoted to building a cybersecurity awareness training application, and this became our startup. Today, it serves more than 1 million users training in cybersecurity every day, which is amazing for me, and it's growing all the time. So one of the key aspects, one of the key things is never to despair, never to stop. If you're an entrepreneur, try again, enjoy the journey. because, as I said, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes you think you're on top of the mountain, sometimes you're dropping down. It will never end. Because as a startup, you lack resources, you have larger competitors, the market doesn't know you, you have to educate them. It is part of the journey. They are not to be looked at as obstacles that block us. They are to look at as obstacles we have to climb and move on.
You must have collected a lot of wisdom during your time building companies. What was the biggest lesson you learned?
That was it. Two lessons. One of them is not to fear failure. And the second one is that not everything depends on us. So if you fail, try again and try again. I know people who have tried, entrepreneurs who tried 1, 2, 3 startups before the fourth or the fifth succeeded. So if you're an entrepreneur, look for the next opportunity. Even if you believe the sky fell on you, try again. If you're an entrepreneur, you will want to do it, and you will be disappointed if you don't try again.
A lot of the topics that came out of the founder's journey when I was speaking to other founders is the loneliness you face while building it, because it is a lonely journey. I mean, if you want to be exceptional, you have to be the exception. There was a quote from another entrepreneur, and you're not doing what everyone else is doing, and you are going intentionally against the tide. How did you manage that period of life of yours?
So first of all, choose great partners, great co-founders, and join a community of founders. There are many communities of founders, especially in Israel, that communicate and they talk and help each other, especially on the other aspects of the business, such as generic go-to-market strategies, consultants and service companies you can work with, and general questions, and even specific. There are specific groups of qualified founders where we talk about our specific issues and help each other. So you don't have to be alone in the journey. It's mostly in our mind that we are alone, because the more we consult, the more we talk to with people we trust or with information we are willing to share, the more information we'll get. Of course, at the end, we make our own decisions, but the more you talk with people, the more they enrich you, the more you enrich them, and the easier the journey is, especially for tasks which are not core. For example, I want to start a subsidiary in the US. What is the best way? There are thousands of entrepreneurs who already did it.
Right.
Talk to one of them.
Right, so I like your point where you said we're lonely mostly in our mind, but we have to reach out and we'll find people who are facing the same troubles.
Yeah, exactly.
It's mostly that entrepreneurs think they're alone because, well, they are quite alone. Not a lot of people are building what they're building, but there are still, of course. So you must just put a bit more effort into finding the people, your people, and then finding a community. What about also another topic that comes up often is work-life balance, which doesn't exist for entrepreneurs. What was your period like when you were in the most intense building phase?
I don't have a good answer for that because my work-life balance was not great, but I accepted it. My wife accepted it and supported me. And that's part of it. Have someone who supports you and understand that this is part of the journey. There's, people will tell you, try to do this, try to do that. Find your own way and accept it as part of the cost of the journey.
Did you meet your wife before you are building something or during? And would you recommend finding someone if you want to build something, because it does require a lot of support when you want to build something, or should you just focus and delay those relationships for further futures?
Find your own way. Find your own way. Do what is right for you. I'm not an expert on marital issues. Typically, I know what I did, but it was my personal journey. So find your journey. I wouldn't delay being happy for anything.
Gotcha. So learn to make it work now, otherwise you will never ever learn how to make it work in any way.
Learn to make it work now, later, whenever it makes sense.
Gotcha. Any final advice for any aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening to us right now? Maybe also if they're planning to do something in the cybersecurity space.
What I said before, enjoy the journey. It's not going to be an easy one.
Gotcha. Amazing. Tzach, if anyone wants to learn about your company, CyberTech, and also CyberGuru, where can they go, and if maybe they want to learn from you?
Of course, they can either reach me directly. I'll give you my contact details, or they can go on our websites and inquire through there.
Amazing. Tzach, thank you very much. It's been a masterclass.
Thank you very much for having me.